Alrighty, I want to go over the instructions for lab 5-minute code lab04a utilizing a boolean. So our main objectives is to understand the data type of bool, understand how it creates the values of true and false, and then create the print statements with the bool data type or output the data value of bool. Now before we get into the coding, let's take a look at our starter code and a couple quick comments. Again, put your information in here so I know whose work I'm grading. Now for each of the parts, I've set up a header and it's kind of unique. So when you run the code, so let me run the code real quick to show you what the output is. What it's doing is creating obviously a red header part, and that is because of this particular syntax right here. Now this is kind of unique, so let me explain it real quickly. So I'm utilizing a an F string, and the F string is creating a new line there, and here I have C1. C1 is actually an escape code for printing out the color red. So I'm starting out with red, the escape code, printing out 25 dashes. The next line is also kind of unique because it's another F string that's going to print out part 1, and I'm utilizing some additional syntax here to center it at 25. Meaning that whatever characters is going to divide this up and center it, so you can see that this all is centered, part 1, part 2, part 3, because of this particular code. Now the last line is finishing off with another F string where I have 25 equal signs, and then I'm utilizing end, and end is an escape code over here to convert the colors back to its original color of white. So if I did not have this portion right there, what will happen is all the text, all the output will basically be all red. So with that being said and done, let's take a look at what we need to do with the parts. So the first part we're going to do is we're going to create variables. One that's going to have a value of false, another one is going to have a value of a string with null. I mean, there's nothing there, so null, N-U-L-L, simply means nothing, blank. And then we have an integer value of 0. So let's create those variables real quick. And we'll do this by entering and creating these variables. So I'm utilizing test1, test2, test3 to identify my variables. And now let's get rid of some of these extra lines. All right, next line here, what we're going to do is we're going to create 3 print statements to show the value and the data type. And we'll continue on by utilizing these print statements. So we'll do print, the value for test1 is test1, and the data type is going to be type test. And the value for test2 for the value is this, and then the data type for test2 is that, and the same goes with 3. So now let's go ahead and run our code. So let me make this bigger here. Let me switch gears here. Let me clear the screen, and then we'll run the code. So if we look at basically what the output is to what the statements are doing. So the first one for test 1, the value is false, which matches there, and the data type is class bool, because we established that this is going to be a Boolean type, and by utilizing the word false, it makes it bool. Now for test 2, we have something different. So for test 2, the value is blank, right? And the data type is string. Well, we kind of knew that there, but we wanted to see why is it not type bool. And then we have test 3, the value is 0, and the data type is class int. So it's not quite what I wanted you to guys do with that particular print statement. So let's go ahead and make some better print statements, and we're going to do something along the lines of this now. we're going to create actually two sets of print statements for each of the tests. So test 1 is going to identify the value and then the value of the bool, and then same thing for test 2 and same thing for test 3, and I'm also utilizing some spaces in between to make it a little bit more readable. And let's see there. So one thing that you notice here, what I did is I changed the syntax just ever so slightly. Over here we end up utilizing the type, and I'm still utilizing the type here, but you notice I'm utilizing the keyword bool to identify what the value of this is going to be in the Boolean expression. So you can see I've did it for test 1, test 2, and test 3. So let's go ahead and run the code. Let me clear the screen. Run the code. And now we have something that's a little bit more useful so you understand what's going on with the coding. So now for test 1 we established that it is false and it is also false. Well, we knew that we didn't actually have to do this particular part because we created a variable that was false. Now for value number 2, for test 2, it is blank and it is now, look at that, false. So we're establishing this part here. So when there is a null, it registers as false. And then when we have a value of 0, it is also identified as false, even though it is a class int. So when we end up utilizing these, let's say a prefix for the variable, it's going to display if it's going to be true or false. So in all these cases, these were all false. All right, so now let's get rid of some spaces here. Let's go for part 2. Same thing, I got my header there. Let me get rid of some lines. And this time what we're going to do is we're going to create 3 variables. One is going to be true, the other one is going to be yup, and the other one is going to be 1. So I'm going to create my variables here. All right, so same thing, I'm utilizing, take a look at the code here, actually reusing the variables that I had earlier from test 1, test 2, test 3. Now this doesn't matter in this particular case because I don't have a need to keep these things consistent throughout the code. So I'm just repurposing these particular variables. And then let me get rid of some lines here, make it nice, and then we're going to write our print statement. So this time when we write our print statements, we're going to write it complete. The better way of doing it, so we're going to show the value of the Boolean value as well. So same kind of process, we just pretty much copy and paste the information from part 1. So we're going to see what the value of the output is going to be. Alrighty, so let me get rid of all this, and then let's go ahead and clear the screen and rerun the code. So let's look at part 2. So part 2 is saying that the value for test 1 is true, right? Because we had it over here, so that's referring to that, and it is true. Now again, we did not have to utilize this because test 1 is already a Boolean by that particular word right there. If we look at test number 2, test number 2 is yup and it is true, so there is data in that particular string, so therefore it makes it true. Again, this is class string. And then we have our last one, which is test 3. So when we look at test 3, the value of it is 1 and it is true and is of a type int. So anywhere where we have it's true because we're doing this part. So anywhere where there's a value, it's going to display true. Again, we need to utilize this to identify if it's going to be true or false. Now let's take a look at the last part. The last part is we're going to create a variable that is going to be -5 and create a print statement to show the variable. And for that one, we'll just do something along the lines of this. So we're going to create, we'll repurpose test1, and then we'll write our print statement to identify what the value is and what the Boolean value is, and then what the actual data type. So now let's run the code, and then we see that our output is as follows. So the value for test1 is -5, and it
Boolean,
is true.
the value is going to be
and
either
this is
true
also
or false,
type
utilizing
of
those
int.
words. Or we could actually utilize other values. So these are some of the other options that we have. So if we're doing some testing and the value happens to be 0, that's going to result in a false. If we take a look at another situation where we're looking at a string and a string is null, meaning nothing, that's also going to result in a false. And then if we have a non-zero integer, that's going to result in a true. And then we have a string, and if there's anything in a string, that's also going to result in a true evaluation.